Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Gene Select here again, and today we're going to be doing a bit of a review and a bit of a critique on value. So today we're just on good old Wikipedia. Who hasn't used it? We're looking at the list of the most expensive paintings. So these would have been paintings sold at either private auction or, excuse me, some sort of auction of some kind. We're just going to be doing the top 10 because there are a lot on this list and it would be a lot longer if we did everything. So there's some interesting ones on this list. These definitely aren't necessarily the greatest paintings of all time because there's a certain level where if you're particularly famous and you don't have very many paintings around, it's really hard for a painting to actually go up for sale. Um, so you'll definitely see some recognizable names on here, but the actual paintings themselves won't be some of those big ones you think of, like Starry Night by Van Gogh, or like Birth of Venus, or the Mona Lisa, that kind of thing. Because at a certain level, if it's like the apex of a very well known artist who doesn't have very many paintings left, they're just not for sale. They'll live their entire life in some sort of museum, usually, or in certain very special circumstances, a private collection, and that's where they stay because they're just so bankable that it would be absolutely insane to sell it. So we'll get right into it. We'll start down here at number 10. This will be the first one that we're looking at. Anything below that, great paintings, and I actually wish I could look at some of these, but for the sake of the length of the video, we're just going to stick to the top 10. I'll go over how much it costs, what it is, who made it, and then the date it was sold. I believe everything here was sold post 2011. So all of these are still pretty recent within the last decade. The first one here for $180.1 million. We're going to be looking at the adjusted price because that's a lot more comparable to one another versus what they were sold. Because of course, even though these were all made in the last, or were all sold in the last decade, time does have an impact on how much it'd be worth, even in a couple of years. So we're going to be looking at this first column, $180.1 million, Nukuche by Amedeo Modigliani. And what a spicy painting this is. Clearly a reclined woman. Can obviously tell what it is. She happens to be in the nude. Don't let that freak you out. If you're into painting, plan on seeing a lot more of it. But it's a great painting. I mean, it's quite simple. There aren't brushstrokes I would call particularly advanced, but I mean, he definitely gets the point across. There's some good shading on the skin in a lot of the places, especially in like the torso area here. But look at this background. Pretty splotchy and not, I would say, particularly technically advanced. We, of course, have the no eyeballs, the Modigliani special. Very easy to pick out. Quite stylized, and I'd say a good example of his work. Sold on November 9th, 2015. So I definitely call that worth it. 181, that's not too much compared to some of the other ones we have higher up on this list. And Modigliani is a very bankable name. It does great work, and it will have longevity to what it is as well. So if we move out to the next one, we have a Picasso for $189.6 million. Les Femmes d'Alger. Version O or version 0. I wonder which one that is. May 11th, 2015. Let's take a peek at this one here. And I'd say this is a nice Picasso. He's done some pretty wacky stuff. I'd say this is a great example of it, but he did some Cubism works that I wouldn't say are particularly advanced. This one, like, look at this woman over here. That is absolutely fantastic. That's a Picasso through and through. There are a lot of women, by the look of it, in this painting here. And Picasso might be, I would almost want to say, like top 3, top 5 most recognizable painters. So for 186.9, that would definitely put him above, I would say, Modigliani in being worth it for the price. Because just for $10 million, you get somebody with a much more recognizable name. Still a great painting. And even though, compared to something like what we have next up on the list, technique wasn't applied in a very realistic approach, still does total justice to his style and is a generally I would definitely call a great painting. So he would go a little bit higher in the value category. So next year we have pendant portraits of Martin Soulmans and, excuse me, Oupjen Coppet. I'm pretty sure I didn't pronounce that right, but go right ahead and correct me in the comment section. $190 million. So by a narrow margin of 400 grand. Oh no, only 400 grand, nothing. Pennies to these people, I imagine. You get this Rembrandt. So Rembrandt, great name. If we look at the actual painting here, you can see this is definitely Rembrandt style. The fabrics are incredible. Debatably the most realistic looking, probably the most realistic looking in this top 10 list. I do know which ones we're looking at next. But I wouldn't call it particularly exciting. I don't think this is as captivating of a painting as something like that Picasso that we were just looking at, but the man has incredible talent. He was a master of light, so you can see the depth is so realistic on these folks here. This woman looks a little washed out, probably just from age of the painting, but let's go back to them there. Let's go back down. So definitely still worth it. I would think I'm going to put Picasso higher on the worth it list, because for only 400,000, even though it's not from a practical, realistic looking standpoint as advanced, this Picasso, just the name alone, would probably get you a pretty big advantage in the long run. Although I imagine Picasso has a lot more works floating around, so that actually might be able to tip the scales in Rembrandt's favor. We'll return to that one. So now we have a very special one. Mark Rothko. $197 million, sold in August 2014. We have number 6, violet, green, and red. And I mean, look at that. That's beautiful. This might even be the nicest painting on this list. Yeah, no. If you've watched my other video there, you've seen that I'm not the biggest fan of Mark Rothko in the world, and for $197 million, you may as well have thrown it in a trash can and put flame to it, because, I mean, you'll make money off of this. If you owned any of these paintings, you're not hurting. But by a worth it standpoint, I would definitely not put this higher than something like this Rembrandt or this Modigliani. Like, I would definitely pay this much for some of these other ones here. Or what are we looking at? The 197. I would easily call that worth it for the other ones for the most part, and paying something like that for a Rothko, I don't think that's worth it at all. Sorry, Mark. Definitely bottom of the list right now. I'd say Rothko, Modigliani, and I'm going to come back to this one after we've looked at some others. So next we have probably my favorite actual painting on this list. We have Wasserschlangen 2. So this is the second version of one. I actually prefer the first version personally, but on this list it's fantastic. 197.7, so beaten up by $700,000 over this Rothko. I mean, I don't know how it's not more compared to this Rothko, but by Gustav Klimt. And if you've seen my other video, you know that I put a lot of my expertise there in Gustav Klimt. Fantastic artist. This is a beautiful painting. His patterning is incredible. I think I like the first one a bit more because it involves some of that gold leaf and it just looks so beautiful. But this one's also incredible. His faces just look, for this style, so realistic. There are 4 ladies, it looks like, in this one here. Beautiful painting. And for less than $200 million, like, that's a steal as far as I'm concerned. He's top of the list right now. Now for the next one, number 17A, Jackson Pollock, $211 million, September 2015. That will be one that you will see repeating a couple times, I believe. The Rembrandt, the Jackson Pollock here. There's a de Kooning at the top. They were all private sales, so I suspect that these were all actually sold at the same auction for the most part, because all of them do not specify the day, and they're all the same year. So that's a pretty big one. But number 17A, Jackson Pollock. Let's take a closer look at this one. I mean, in fairness to Pollock, I think this is one of his better works, but it does not captivate me. I would say to a high level. I mean, it's pretty nice to look at, actually. It's not that bad. But for the amount of money that was paid for it, I mean, I would I'd put that into making sure I beat this guy for the Klimt for the most part. Jackson Pollock's a very bankable name as well, but um, even though these aren't the kind of paintings you'd actually keep in your house, otherwise you're just asking to be robbed for it. Um, that's a pretty wide margin. We're talking 700,000 between these two here, and then we jump up about 13 million almost for this next spot. So I don't think that's worth it at all. I'd still put him higher than Rothko because I'll tell you right now, spoiler alert, he's going to be at the bottom of the worth it list by the time we're done here. Next one we have Gauguin. Paul Gauguin, When Will You Marry Me? This would have been painted when he was in Tahiti. It's two nice Tahiti girls here. Um, I'm not a big Gauguin fan, but this is probably one of his best paintings, which isn't saying much because I mean it's not that great. It's still a little bit nicer than that Modigliani as far as technical painting goes, but it's decent subject matter. The background's okay. The background is probably where I definitely would say it sets it apart from the Modigliani. Um, but this is one of his better works. He still is a pretty recognizable name. He was buddies with Van Gogh there. $222 million. That's pretty pricey for a Gauguin. So I don't think that one's particularly worth it, but I still would put it probably just a hair above the Modigliani. Um, so we got Rothko at the bottom. Pollock. We'll do, I guess, Modigliani next. Poor guy. And then I want to do the Gauguin. I'm putting Rembrandt next, Picasso, and then Klimt at the top right now. So we're getting into the top three. So these are some big ones. In the top four here, there are some pretty large jumps between the bunch. So card players by Paul Cézanne. So I don't put too much value on Cézanne necessarily. He's a great painter, but I think that there are a lot of other better ones out there, to be honest. 278 plus million. So I suspect that still drops below whatever that number is, 279 million. April 2011. So this one is the oldest in the top 10 or sold the longest ago. But it's a good painting. I'd say it's one of his better ones. Great use of just some color there on the clothes. It doesn't look too intense. It looks like this is a very natural painting, which I think is one of the very big draws to it, I would say. But for 278 million, I think that's a little bit steep. I'm still going to be putting it above this Gauguin here. I don't know if it'll beat these Rembrandt Picasso team at the bottom because I don't think it's really that great compared to, like, I really like this Picasso. Rembrandt is just so talented um, that I don't think it's going to get much higher than that. But now we have moved up to the number 2 spot, and this is another spot where I really don't think it's worth it at all. We have a Willem de Kooning, which was basically if you took Rothko and Pollock, threw them in some test tubes or something, and created some sort of genetic splice between the two, you're going to come out with somebody who paints like this. And basically, if you took a Rothko and a Pollock and smushed them together hard enough on the canvas, you'd probably end up with something that looks like this. So I've put it every way I possibly could, but it is definitely stylistically across between the two. Probably it was the American. Where's this guy from? He was Dutch. All right, well, you got me there. De Kooning, I guess I should have guessed that. But 317, I can't call that worth it at all. I mean, de Kooning's still a pretty bankable name. I wouldn't even say he's as bankable, though, as Pollock or Rothko, which is saying something, because I'm not a fan of Mark Rothko. So that one's definitely not worth it. I'd definitely be putting Jackson Pollock higher. Rothko still is going to be at the bottom. Now we got the big boy here at the top, Salvador Mundi, $460.3 million. That is a heck of a lot of money. We're almost at $500 million for this. So this is a Leonardo da Vinci. Now there are a couple reasons it sold for that much. One is because I believe this painting was lost or something for a while, or at least it wasn't in circulation or normal circulation for a good long time, and then eventually it did go up for sale by it looks like Dmitry Rybolovev here. He's got some real cojones willing to sell this painting, but I guess he made a pretty penny off of it after Christie's took I'm sure, a healthy sum off the price for their seller's fee. But I mean, there are just so few Leonardos around. This is probably quite worth it for that much money. If you can spend that much on it and make sure that you keep it in good condition and will have it for a long time, you will eventually see great returns on that investment. It looks like some Saudis purchased it. Middle East is great for buying tons of art there. You can see we got Qatar buying some of these ones here. Um, they got a lot of money, oil money. If I had oil money, I'd probably spend it on art too. But that one's definitely, I would say, up there in worth at scale because, I mean, no one's ever going to sell the Mona Lisa. So this might be the best Leonardo you can actually possibly get. If we look at the actual painting itself, which we should do, it's got a very Jesus-like look about it, but you can definitely tell this is Leonardo. One of the ways that you can tell, and what real professionals look at when trying to identify a Leonardo or trying to debunk a fake or reproduction would be these curls here. The geometry of life, that's what he was all about. He made very few mistakes in his painting. His fabrics look incredible. But there actually was something interesting about this painting in particular that is interesting and causes some concern for, was it real? Was it not real? It's a bit of a mystery. So visual perspective was a huge thing for Leonardo da Vinci, and he, like I just said, made very few mistakes. This orb here, this glass orb, quite well painted, and I mean, he distorts everything behind it, so you can definitely tell that he had it in his mind that it would not look the exact same. But if this was truly a glass orb, it would actually be inverted behind. So you would not see this swoosh come all the way down through. It would be distorted. And that was not something that he decided to include because there's no way that he would have overlooked something that serious because optics was one of his main points of research as far as I'm aware. So we have a little bit of a mystery going on with this one here. So that makes it probably actually worth even more money. So let's go back down. We can see the top 10 here, and we'll go through what I think is probably most to least worth it. So down at the bottom, Mark Rothko. I'd pay you to take a Mark Rothko off my hands. I wouldn't pay for it. I'd pay you to get rid of it for me. I just don't think that's super worth it. Next, we got de Kooning. For that much money, his painting's slightly better than Rothko. I'm honestly even tempted to put Rothko higher because that's all. It's over $100 million more for a painting I think is only marginally better. So that might even put it lower, but I can't not put Rothko at the bottom. So we'll go Rothko, Kooning, Jackson Pollock, still better than this one, and I mean it is also a more reasonable price. That definitely would go ahead of the de Kooning. Next, I gotta put my man Amedeo Modigliani. Still a fantastic painter, and I really like this one. I wish I could actually put it higher. It's one of my more favorite ones on the list, but for the price point and for the actual painting you're getting, I do not find this particularly incredible as far as painting goes. Now, right above that, we'll put the Gauguin. It's not that much more. 40 million isn't that much on this list. We'll put that right above Modigliani here, partially because Gauguin is still a very good bankable name, but this is, I think, one of his best paintings, if not maybe his best. And then the Cézanne afterwards, just because I like Cézanne significantly more. It definitely is a jump up compared to this Gauguin here, but Card Players is probably his most famous work, or one of them, which it's rare to get the actual full famous work be available for sale. So it was probably a pretty good steal, and that one will net you some profit over time, absolutely as well. So we'll put Cézanne next. Then I'm going to go down to, we'll say Rembrandt. So even though he's probably, this painting is the most technically advanced from a specifically painting standpoint on this list, he is going to go right after Cézanne there, because it's still, I mean, that's a pretty good price compared to some of the higher ones up for such a good name and such an actually good painting. Afterwards, we'll have Pablo Picasso with Les Femmes d'Alger. Beautiful painting. This one is, like a painting like this is how more abstract art I think should be taken into account. Things like interchange. There needs to be a certain level of being able to connect with an audience, and if you look at a painting, you'll connect with it somehow. But I think with a bit better imagery, it is a little bit easier to get that across. And I'm sure people who spend this much money on paintings obviously at least have some sort of level of understanding of art, or at least the people they pay to buy it for them do. Um, but I'm putting Picasso at number 3 there for most worth it for the price point. Afterwards, we're going to have Gustav Klimt. I really wish I could put him higher, but with a name like Leonardo da Vinci, even though we're talking a difference of over $250 million, there are other Gustav Klimts out there that you might be able to get your hands on. There are pretty well no Leonardo da Vinci's you will be able to get your hands on. So it really, like, even though in 2 years, from 17 to 19, we're already talking a net of $10 million. This one has generated about 15, but in a significantly larger amount of time. Um, so as long as you can keep this in good condition, you're probably still in good hands. So that does conclude our worth it for the value tier list of the top 10 most expensive paintings ever sold at private auctions. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you learned a thing or two today, gained a bit of a perspective on painting and how painting purchasing and all that stuff works. So thank you very much. Like and subscribe. Stay tuned for more. And thank you for watching.